Welcome to Boardroom Insights. This is the first lecture of the year. We have right now we have 6 scheduled throughout the year. You've seen the speakers there. I'm not going to talk about them right now. I'm going to talk about the one that you have today. We're fortunate today to have Christopher Johns, who is the president of Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Mr. Johns is president of Pacific Gas, a member of the utility, and is a member of the utilities board of directors. PG&E Company is a subsidiary of PG&E Corporation, which is one of the largest combined natural gas and electric utilities in the United States. PG&E Corporation, and I apologize because you got to go back and forth between the two in some respects, but the corporation is a Fortune 200 energy-based holding company with $52 billion in assets and over $15 billion in annual operating revenues. Mr. Johns joined Pacific Gas and Electric in 1996 as the vice president and controller. He was named the Senior Vice President Controller of PG&E Corporation in September 2001 and was elected Chief Financial Officer in January of 2005. Mr. Johns was named President of Pacific Gas and Electric Company in August of 2009. Before joining PG&E, Mr. Johns was a partner in the KPMG Pete Marwick LLP. Mr. Johns earned a bachelor's degree in accounting. I want to hear a hoorah. Accounting from the University of Notre Dame, so you don't have to be a finance major, okay? He also completed the Nuclear Reactor Technology program at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is a certified public accountant in the states of California and Florida and serves as a member of the board for the California Chamber of Commerce and as a member of the Board of Trustees and the San Francisco Ballet. Again, we'd like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Johns.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be back. I was, not sitting where you're sitting 30 years ago because this building didn't even exist at that point in time, but was an anxious business student and, yes, an accounting student. I was asked to kind of push a little bit for the accounting role as opposed to the finance role, and I said, well, I'm not going to be very good at that. I have 2 boys who I told them, you can always get a job as an accountant. Go major in accounting. And so they majored in communications and classic studies. So I'm not really effective at that. But I am excited to be here. Hopefully you're all excited, right? First game tomorrow? Big deal, that's right. The alums, we always have a very special bond, and not nearly as good as the students and the faculty, but with the team. And I will confess, I have a very special bond too with the football program here. I was one of the head student managers of the football team when I was here, and it was a great experience for me. But it does make me get a little anxious about every game because I'm so excited about it happening, and I'm such a dedicated fan that. My poor wife, who is here today to witness this, I actually made her put in our marriage vows that she would agree to watch every game with me on every Saturday. So she didn't know what she was getting into, though, because I'm like one of the worst people to watch a Notre Dame football game with. I generally won't watch a Notre Dame football game with anybody because I tend to get all excited and throw things and say bad things at times, those kind of things. And in fact, it reminds me, our CEO of the company is also a Notre Dame guy, and he joined us 2 years ago. And he joined us right about now, first football weekend. And I went in on Monday morning after the first football game, and I said to him, I really apologize. I should have invited you over to watch the game with me because you're new to town. Maybe didn't have that many things going on. And he said, oh, no problem, Chris. I already had a commitment. In fact, didn't even get to watch most of the game. And I said, well, that's probably a good thing because I'm just a terrible person to watch Notre Dame football games with. And he goes, oh, you know what, Chris? I was the same way. I used to get all ramped up and excited and mad, and it just really, ruined my weekends if we lost. And he said, and at the time, when I'm having this conversation with him a couple years ago, so I was 51 and he was 62 at the time, and he said, but Chris, I decided when I turned 55 that I was no longer going to let the outcome of a game played by a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds determine the quality of my weekend. And so I looked at him and I said, oh, crud, you mean I have 4 more years of this? So anyway, I am excited about being here today and about the football game tomorrow. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is some of the things that we face in our industry and quite frankly in business in general, and that is balance and choices. Choices that we have to make that are not always black and white choices, that challenge us, not only on a professional level from a business standpoint, whether we're going to make more money or less money in this instance, but sometimes even on a very ethical basis and a moral basis as to what's right or wrong. And so I'm going to walk through some of the things that we're facing and talk to you and not actually in many instances give you answers. Hopefully I'm going to make you think a little bit about it, and maybe you'll have your own answers because there are always that evident of a really good answer for it. And it'll be something that you'll face because you'll have people with different priorities. You'll face people with different values in their lives, and they may be looking at you for clarity, for making a decision. And sometimes that decision, like I said, there won't be a right or a wrong answer, but it will have ramifications on your company, on you personally, how you're viewed, and how people view you and think about you. So do we have any golfers in here? People like to golf? I like to golf. I'm terrible at golfing, but I love golfing. And I really became addicted to it when I was here at school because I don't know if they still do this, but when I was here, when you were a second semester senior and you were about to graduate, if you had a B or an A in your class, you could opt out of the final and just take the grade. And so I was a decent student, so I had an A or an B in every one of my classes. And so I had no finals my second semester senior year. Now, if you think about it, they give you, sometime almost a week to study before finals, and then finals are like a week long, and then there's, another half a week before you graduate. So it's like 2.5, 3 weeks of time. And so I called my parents up and said, hey, I'm done. Can I just come home and skip graduation? Okay, I was a little stupid at the time. And my dad, bless his soul, he's a steel worker, worked very hard to send me to college. And he said, are you kidding me? I worked my whole life to send you to this school. You're going to the graduation. I want to see you up there on the stage getting that diploma. So I was stuck here for 3 weeks. So also at the time, there's a golf course on campus. It cost $2 to play golf there all day long. So I played 36 holes of golf for like 3 weeks straight and became very addicted to it. And the reason I bring up golf, and one of the things I like about it, is because golf, there's a lot of values that you learn in golf. One of them is integrity. Because if you think about the game of golf, right, when you slice one off into the trees, which I do quite frequently, you get a ball laying there, and it's behind a tree. Nobody's around, and you have to make a decision. And whatever decision you make, nobody's going to know because they're off somewhere else searching in other trees for their golf ball. Or most likely they're in the middle of the fairway, far away from you. So do you give it a little kick and then move on? Or do you do what the rules say and pick it up or drop it out where you're supposed to drop it and count the stroke and count the penalty? But it really reinforces with you on who you are and how you think about the game and where your integrity is. And those same things happen in the business world. It's the importance of those decisions that you make when nobody else is looking. They reflect on who you are, who your company is at all points in time. And we face those all the time. There's many times that I'm sitting in my office by myself, faced with a decision, that I've gathered whatever input I can gather, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong or a clear-cut answer, that I have to make that decision. And it's at that moment that then reflects and will have an impact on 21,000 people that work for PG&E and has an impact on the 15 million customers that we serve. And those are the kind of things that we have to face each and every day. So today we're going to talk about how some of those things look in the utility industry. And it's an exciting time to be in the utility industry. And hopefully as you listen to this today, it might even tweak your interest in being in the utility industry. Now I know. You think, I don't want to be in the utility industry. Boy, what a boring industry that is. And hopefully you'll see that it isn't. Because I'll tell you what, when I came to Notre Dame, did I think I was going to be the president of a utility? No. When I came to Notre Dame, I thought I was going to go to law school. In fact, I was going to be a political science major because that's what I heard people did in order to get into law school. Luckily, my father served on a school board in Pennsylvania, and he met some lawyers, and they told him, you know what, you don't have to go to political science. You can go into business school and still go on to law school. And in fact, just in case you decide not to be a lawyer, that would be a good fallback, is to have a business degree. So I still planned to do that, but I decided, okay, well, I'm good with numbers, so I'll be an accountant. I'll go get an accounting degree. I liked math, and that's what I did. As a side story, I used to coach a lot of Little League, and I was talking to one of the assistant coaches one day about going to law school, and one of my little kids looked up at me and said, "Why do you want to be a policeman?" It was a fun moment at the time. So anyway, I was going to go to law school. In fact, when I was senior year here, I applied to law schools, even got into a few law schools, but decided that when the big accounting companies came on, it'd be good to get some experience in interviewing. And I learned some very valuable things on doing those interviews. First one was with, at the time, Waterhouse. They didn't have Coopers yet. They were just Waterhouse. And I went into the interview, and they said, well, where would you like to work? And I said, El Paso, Texas is where I'd like to work. And I wanted to work in El Paso, Texas, because I was tired of all the cold winters up here in Indiana and in Pennsylvania. I wanted to move south. The only person I knew that lived in the south at all was one of my roommates. He lived in El Paso, Texas, so that's where I wanted to go. And the guy said, you know, we don't have an office in El Paso, Texas. The interview went really bad after that. I hadn't done my homework to even know that they didn't have an office down there. So I gave it a second try with KPMG. First thing I found out is they did have an office in El Paso, Texas. So I went down, did the interview. In fact, a little sad story on how I actually probably got the job is that many of the firms probably still come in and recruit here. I would imagine they bring lots of people come in. They used to come in and spend like a week, and you would just sign up for a job interview. And I signed up for Friday morning at 8 a.m. For the job interview. And I didn't know that Thursday night they had a big social the night before, I guess, for students. I wasn't a drinker when I was here in school. And so I show up at 8 a.m. Friday morning for my interview. In fact, it showed up at 5 minutes to 8. 8 o'clock, I'm still sitting there. The guy hasn't shown up. 8:05, 8:10, 8:15, the guy finally shows up. And he doesn't look in very good shape. Evidently, it's a pretty big party that they have from the night before, that they take all the students out. And he must have partied a little bit too long. And so the interview was very short. He was very apologetic for not being there, asked me where I wanted to go. I said, El Paso, Texas. He said, would you consider Midland, Texas? I said, I didn't even know there was a city named Midland, Texas. He goes, all right, I'll send you off to El Paso. And I went back and did my interview down in El Paso. They offered me money, offered me a job. I said, you know what, my dad can hardly afford to pay for law school. I don't want to get loans, so I'll take the job. I can always go back to law school later. So I joined El Paso. Within my second year there, we got El Paso Electric as a big customer, basically doubled the size of the office. That's how big of a customer they were, and that launched my utility career. And I haven't left because it's been an exciting career. As a little bit of an end of that story about the guy that recruited me, Midland, Texas is where the big oil is. And 2 years after I joined El Paso, oil went through one of those slumps, and the Midland, Texas office was too big. That partner got transferred to El Paso. So I saw him 2 years later, and I said, hey, I remember you. He goes, really? And I said, yeah, you recruited me at Notre Dame. He pulls me aside, and he says, look, don't talk to anybody about that trip, especially not my wife. So that launched my career in the utility industry, and it is an exciting one, and it may not sound like it, but when you see some of the things that we're doing, it's an industry that affects every single thing that we do as a country, as an individual. It makes sure that these lights are on. It makes sure that the iPads and iPhones that you have can get charged up. It makes sure that when you're cold at night, you can flip the thermostat and it comes on. It makes sure that the hospitals have all the electronics that keep the folks alive working. It's part of the fabric of every single thing that we do as an individual each and every day. And that's quite something to be involved with. It also affects our environment, which is a big deal because we generate electricity using a lot of different fuels, some of them fossil fuels that have impacts on global warming. And it affects geopolitical issues because right now, all of a sudden, natural gas is abundant in the United States. And that has huge ramifications where we used to be a massive importer of natural gas to potentially be an exporter of natural gas. And it just changes the whole economy. So those are the kind of things that we'll take a look at. So as we start, talk about just a little bit about PG&E itself. And I'm going to take a little risk here as I introduce our company. How many people in this room are from or have lived in California? Okay. All right, so it looked like about 20 or so. So that's maybe close because they said there's like 250, close to 200 or so people in the room. So about 1 out of every 20 of you. That's how big we are. We serve 15 million people, which will tell you how big California is, which is 1 out of every 20 Americans. And we don't do anything outside of California. That's how many people live in northern and central California. So we serve 15 million people. We have 21,000 people that work for us. And you can see that we are a huge company. You know, it was already said that we're a Fortune 200 company. You don't have to get caught up in the holding company and the utility. Our holding company only owns one thing. It is the utility. It doesn't own anything else. So there really is no difference between our holding company and the utility that we run. And it's a company that if you looked at all the line miles that we have, if you look at all the wires, if you strung them all together, it would get you halfway to the moon. And we've got 6,700 miles of big transmission pipe and 40,000 miles of little distribution pipelines in the service territory. It's a very big, complicated organization. It is a regulated entity. So that means that we are monopoly, and our rates are set by 5 commissioners who are appointed by the governor of the state. And so when you think about what does that mean, and it's important as we go through some of the examples I'm going to give you today that you understand a little bit about how that works. And so for a utility, we get rates that are set by these regulators. And that's what we charge our customers. Well, in California 30 years ago, the state decided that they wanted people to use less energy. They wanted them to be energy efficient. And so they did something called decoupling, which means for the utilities in that state, our revenues are decoupled from our sales. What's that mean? Well, that means that if I sell more electricity, I don't make more money. If I sell less electricity, I don't make less money. Because what happens is that we go through a rate proceeding every 3 years. We say, here's what we think our sales are going to be over the next 3 years. Here's how much it's going to cost us to serve those customers, make those sales. And we argue a little bit about whether those are the right costs or right sales numbers. And then they say, okay, we're going to give you revenues to cover the cost of those sales, of your expenses. And then we're going to give you a little bit of a return, 10.4% in our case right now, that will let you collect those revenues. Then you take your estimated sales, divide them into those revenues, and that gives you a per kilowatt hour cost that you charge your customers. If the customers use more electricity than you originally thought, that means they've paid you too much. We actually refund the difference the next year. If sales go down and they're less than what you originally thought they were going to be, the difference, we get to charge our customers more the following year. So we're really indifferent. And why did they do that? Because they said, we want people to be energy efficient. Who would be the best kind of companies to help reinforce that energy efficiency? Well, the utilities would be. But they're normally incented to sell more of their product. So we want to take that incentive away. So when I was a CFO, one of the oddest things that would happen is I would go to Wall Street and I would talk to them. And I'm one of the very few people that would walk in and say, you know what? I actually can make more money by selling less of my product. I mean, think about that. Who goes in and does that? But the way we make money is we either A, have our expenses be less than what that estimate was. B, we invest in capital and earn the 10.4% return on that capital. Or C, we have incentives put in place for us to use less energy. And if we meet those incentives, we actually can make more money. We get a bonus, if you will, from the regulator. So we can actually make more money by selling less of our product. Don't try to take that on any other business part that you have in any of your classes. I don't think it'll pass. But for us, that's the way it works. And it's been very successful in the state, because what that's meant is that the per capita usage of electricity in the state of California for the last 30 years has basically stayed flat. And think about that. That's 30 years. That's the advent of all the dot-com big boom, all the new computers that have come on. but the average usage in California on a per capita basis has been flat. In the rest of the United States, it's gone up by over 50%. So that's what energy efficiency has done in that state with that kind of a look. As you can see, though, there is a lot of infrastructure that we have, a lot of distribution lines, a lot of poles, a lot of pipes throughout there, and we, like everybody else, have to modernize it right now. That's one of the challenges that we face. Just like you look at bridges and you look at roads, you look at airports, most of this stuff was put into place before 1960. In fact, probably 50% of our assets were put in place in the ground or in the air before 1960. So it has to be modernized, and it has to be modernized in a different way. Because nowadays people want all the cool techie stuff, right? They want solar panels on their rooftops. They want to drive electric vehicles around. So we have to modernize our system in order to be able to enable all of that. So I'm going to give you 4 things today that we're going to kind of walk through that are industry issues that we face to really have an eye on what we as an industry face, which is more about not just replacing infrastructure, but sustainability. So how many people here would say they'd like to see more renewables put into place? More wind, more solar, any of that kind of stuff? Okay, I was going to say, you guys were very hesitant there. All right, keep your hands up. So it's almost everybody. Now, how much are you willing to pay for that? Are you willing to pay? Now, and when I ask this question, all right, when I ask this question, it is you're paying yourself, all right? You're paying your own electric bill. Maybe it's averages $100 a month. Mom and dad are not paying it. Somebody else is not paying it. You're paying it yourself. So this is your money. How many are willing to pay an extra $1 a month for the renewables, more renewables? Okay, pretty good. How about an extra $5 a month? Wow, hands still up there. How about an extra $10 a month? Uh-oh, hands are starting to go down. How about $20 a month? Oh, a lot of hands went down. We have a few rich people that are still, or actually ideological people that say we should. Okay, so that's an important question, though, right? Renewables at what price? How many people are here from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Tennessee area? All right, some people. What's like one of the most important jobs in those states? Coal. Coal. Big manufacture, big coal areas, right? Well, coal is used to generate electricity. But coal pollutes, has a lot of greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. Folks in West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, in those coal states, how much renewables do you think they want to see? Not a lot, right? I mean, they do maybe theoretically, but it has a big impact on the economic, the economy in those states. So that's probably why when you think about those different issues, how much are you willing to pay for renewables, what do we do with coal or not, that's some of the reasons we probably don't have a national energy policy, because those are hard issues for people to think about and talk about. So if we look at where we are, oh, I didn't know this was this interactive, wow. Here's what the nation right now looks like in generating electricity. You can see that coal is about 37%, natural gas is about 30%. Coal was actually close to 50% as early as about 5 years ago. But because of the global warming concerns and about the pollution that's there, it started to come down. That wasn't really the only reason it's come down. The biggest reason is because we've been able to figure out how to get more natural gas out of shale rock in the United States. And now we have a massive amount. I mean, we went from having depleted, almost none available, to now having as much as we need for a very long future. So we're going to continue to see this move where coal is projected to be probably less than 20% in the next 10 years or so, and natural gas getting closer to 50%. For PG&E, we actually have one of the cleanest portfolios in the country. We've got natural gas, but we've got nuclear at 21%. We've got the largest privately owned hydroelectric system in the United States, which represents another 15-20%. And then we've got almost 20% from renewables, from solar, from wind, from geothermal, from small hydro during the time. California did this really interesting thing. When they defined renewables, they excluded most of the hydroelectric generation as a renewable. And that really didn't sit well with us because we have a huge portfolio of of hydroelectric. But they did it because they wanted new stuff to be built. So they defined that out so that new things would have to be built. So you can see that it's good. It's going to continue to grow. Right now, we're at 60% as a company of GHG-free emissions. And by the time 2020 comes around, we'll be close to 75% of GHG-free. And so that's important. The reason that I bring this up, though, is because California, and here's where you start to get into the questions and the choices you make. California, I don't know how long ago it was, 10 years ago or so, decided that we're going to focus on greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. And when they put in a rule that says by 2020, we want greenhouse gas emissions to be down to 1990 levels. Great, good policy. Let's all go out and attack that. But our legislators were bored or something, and they decided that not only were we going to set that as a target, we're going to tell you how to get there. So they passed a law that said we have to have renewables. We want 33% renewables by 2020. And not only that, we want 33% renewables. We want those 33% renewables to basically be all in the state. We'll let you import a little bit, but most of it's got to come in the state. And also, we don't want you to use these things called RECs, which are renewable energy credits. And what that is that if somebody, say, has a solar panel on the rooftop, they're generating electricity from it, they have, it's clean energy, they may not sell you the electricity, but they'll sell you the benefit, the credit for them generating clean electricity. So it just basically separates the credit for it. And they said in California, and by the way, we'll let you do a little RECs, but we don't want that either. Now, why did they do that? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, the unions got involved, so that's why it's in-state. The unions wanted labor jobs in the state of California. So it makes sense. And then the reason they didn't want RECs is that they wanted new facilities, new steel in the ground to be built, new renewables. And that also can make a lot of sense. But I don't know about any of you, but you'll find this out in life and business, that when you are going out and getting bids then for contracts for people to build renewables for you, and they know two things, they know several things. One, you can't go out of state. Two, you can't buy a REC. And three, you have to buy it. You have to buy it. They have a pricing advantage over you when you do that. Especially in an industry like solar that at the time was very new, wasn't well developed. So that's one of the things that we've had to face as we've gone along the line. So when you look at affordability, there's two issues that arise now with this whole idea about renewables. There's affordability and reliability. On affordability side, what that has done is that's added about $7 a month to the average PG&E bill for renewables. Now, a lot of you, when I said $5, kept your hands up, said not a big deal, even around $10. That's on the average bill. But we're not an average person, each one of us. In fact, California is really interesting. We, as a company, are like two companies. We have a lot of people that live on the coast. We have a lot of people that live in the Central Valley. I happen to live on the coast. I lived there for 17 years in my house, and I've never turned my air conditioner on. Not one day in 17 years have I turned my air conditioner on. My electric bill is like less than $100 a month. And it went down after my two boys moved out. So, that extra $7, not a big deal to me. We have people that live in the Central Valley, Fresno, Manteca, Stockton, Bakersfield, that area. It gets to be over 100 degrees a lot of days during the year. Their bills can be $900 to $1,000 a month for electricity because they're running an air conditioner all day long, or pool pumps or whatever else they have. That extra, and by the way, those cities have some of the largest unemployment in the entire United States. They can barely afford to pay their electric bill. I met with a lot of them. I went on what I called a listening tour and listened to, when I first got into this role, went to 16 different cities throughout our service territory, spent all day listening to customers talk about it. I asked them the same question I asked you. Do you want renewables? They all said, absolutely, we want more renewables, more renewables. When I talked to the folks that live on the coast, I said, would you be willing to pay, $5 more a month for it? Absolutely, not a problem. Talk to the people in the Central Valley, not a chance in the world do they want to pay $5 more because they can't afford it. They're already struggling to have ends meet. Now, it gets a little bit worse because in California, we also have something called tiered rates. When you go out to buy something, if you go to Costco, what are you doing? You're getting a whole bunch of stuff for less money, right? Because you buy in bulk. The more you buy, you can get discounts. and the less it costs. In California, again, we're very focused on conservation, energy efficiency. So our tiers work the other way around. The more electricity you use, the more expensive it gets. So we have 5 tiers. And when we put it into place, it made a lot of sense. There wasn't a whole lot of difference between them. So if you use the first, I don't know what it is, 100 kilowatts during a month, it's one price. The next 100 is another price. The next 100 is another price, and so on up the line. Well, when we had the energy crisis in California, they did something interesting. They said, well, we want to protect those people that are kind of poor or don't use a lot of electricity. So they froze the bottom 2 tier rates, froze them at around 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, okay, during that time made sense. But over the last 15 years, as we've been raising our rates around inflation, around 2% a year, something like that, pretty good deal, those bottom tiers haven't seen a dime of that. Well, when you do the math then, that means that the top tiers are seeing larger increases. In fact, the 5th tier, the highest tier, was seeing increases of like 8, 9, 10%. We got to a point where people that were using very little electricity, like me, were only paying 5 or 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and people in the top tier were paying 40 cents per kilowatt hour. A huge difference. And through no fault of their own, because they live in a hot area where they have to run the air conditioner. So when you think about renewables, right now, if you live on the coast, it's adding about $4 a month to your average bill. If you live in the valley, it's adding about $39 per month to your average bill. And in 2020, when we get all the way up to 33% renewable, if you live on the coast, it's going to add about $6 a month to your bill. And if you live in the valley, it's going to be about $64 a month to your bill. Same customers, same infrastructure. Then it also has a little bit more cost associated with it. Where do you build wind farms and solar farms? In the desert, generally, or up in the hills for the wind. Well, that's not normally near where we have the big transmission lines. So you have to build more infrastructure in order to accomplish all of that. So that adds costs to what you're doing. So keep all that in mind on the cost side of it. The second one is reliability. So I'm going to show you a couple charts. I call this one a spaghetti chart, and you'll see why in a second. So this is what our average day demand looks like. You can see in the early mornings, till 4:30, nobody's really using a whole bunch of electricity. Everybody wakes up seemingly around 6 o'clock, and it starts to go up. Then during the day, it's relatively flat, and then you can see around 4:30, 5 o'clock, yes, we use military time, it ramps up. So our peak is when everybody gets home at the end of the business day. And they come home, they turn on their air conditioners, they turn on all their lights, they're cooking and all that kind of stuff. And then you can see it whittles down as people go to bed. This then shows, the next one shows what wind, how it looks when it's generating. So you can see during the night it's kind of generating a lot because the wind tends to blow a little bit more during the evenings. In the mornings and in the early evenings there's not a lot of wind, and sometimes in the middle of the day there is a lot of wind. This is what solar looks like. Obviously it's gone at night and in the morning, and then it peaks in the middle of the daytime. So neither one of those two things peaks when we need it, right? You can see when we need it is the black line, and when it's available is the other 2 lines. And so if you look, the red now represents what our other facilities have to do. So our water, our nuclear, our gas, we don't have coal. So that's now how we have to run the system. If you think about it, we used to run our nuclear, our water, and our gas basically the same as this black line. But now that we have to have renewables, we have to run them differently. And if you look where the arrows are, that sharp ramp up in the morning and then sharp ramp down when the sun's up, and then the sharp ramp back up again, facilities aren't built to do that fast. So we have to come up with different solutions. We now have to figure out how do we get facilities that can turn off very quickly when the sun's coming up and then turn back on when the sun's going down to be able to meet that in a very short period of time. The technology has to advance, and we're going to have to make some investments to figure that out. This is in a very special occasion, though, because you know what? The sun and the wind don't really work like that all the time. clouds go over, and if you ever saw a map of it and saw what solar looked like, it's not this really nice smooth line. It might be every once in a while, but generally it's a very jagged line all the time. So it's one of the things that we have to really work on. That's why it's a spaghetti chart. This one we call our duct chart. Kind of looks like a duck. This one shows, at the end of the day, what we're going to have to be able to do. Again, when I said that the red line on the other one, so all of our facilities that are not solar, this is what they're going to continue to look like and look like and look like. They're going to be used less and less and less during the day. And basically, we're going to get to a point where we're generating more electricity than we need. And so we'll have a question. What do we do? Again, you can't just turn off a nuclear plant. It takes time to get a nuclear plant to go down, and it takes a lot longer time to get one back up. So you can't just turn them off. You have to be able to utilize them. So one thing we might be able to do is we might be a net exporter of power into the other states around us, maybe. We've looked at that. We probably will be an exporter. You know what the price will be? Negative. We'll actually have to pay people to take our electricity because we have so much of it. Think about that. We're actually going to have to pay them because it's more economic for us to pay them to take electricity than it is to turn the nuclear facility off. So that'll be one thing that'll happen. The second thing is we are going to have to make decisions. And maybe what we can do is we can turn the wind off or we can turn the solar off. But if you do that, then you're no longer in compliance with having 33% renewables. So these are the questions that we have to face, and we have to work with our lawmakers to think about. So when we sit back and say, hey, renewables are a great thing, they are a great thing. They give customers choice. They're great for the environment. They help us with global warming. They help develop new technologies. I mean, look where we've come with solar technology. So they are a great thing to have. But they do have challenges. They have challenges on the rate side, how costly they are, and they have challenges on the reliability side. Are we going to be able to keep the lights on if we have to ramp up and down as quickly as these things show? And you know what? When you go talk to your customers in our industry, all the time, two most important things to them, rates and reliability, all the time. So that's one of the areas that we have to focus on and that we have a big concern about in our industry. So we've been talking about generation on a very large scale. So let's talk about renewables on a very small scale. It's something that we call distributed generation. Whoops. Distributed generation. So distributed generation is, basically think of rooftop solar. Because no longer are you getting your power from far big plants out in the middle of wherever, but you're getting it right from your rooftop. So that's distributed generation. It's a great thing, distributed generation, because it gives our customers choice. They can choose to put a solar panel on their roof, generate their own electricity, and they're doing great things for the environment. So it gives customers choice, and it is good for the environment. But there are some costs associated with that. Not everybody can afford a solar panel. They are still pretty expensive. Basically, the reason you can afford them today is because there's a lot of subsidies that go on. Anybody here have rooftop solar on their home? Anybody? Couple? One? Okay. Yeah. In our service territory, we have 90,000 of them. 90,000. That's 1/3 of all rooftop solars in the United States are in our service territory in Northern and Central California. So we're very supportive of them. We help our customers all the time get rooftop solar. But 1/3 of them are in the United States are in our service territory. But we haven't, as I said, they are expensive, so there's subsidies that go along with them. And one of the subsidies is how our rates are structured. Basically, say you have a rooftop solar and you're able to generate enough electricity throughout the year to offset the amount of electricity you buy from us. So say they're exactly even. You know what that means in California? You get a 0 bill for the year. 0 bill. Sounds like a great deal, isn't it? So what you're able to offset is you get credit for not just the generation piece of what you pay for, but also for the transmission and distribution. For the whole retail rate, you get credit for that. So you get a 0 bill. That does spur people on, because if you look at it, and some of these people that have the $900 to $1,000 a month bills, if all of a sudden they can get a 0 bill for the year, you can do the math, and the payback might be 4 or 5 years in general. Now, as I said, though, if we sell more electricity or less electricity, we don't make more or less money because we're decoupled. So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you. So I went to a get-together, a party one night with a friend of mine, and he invested in rooftop solar. And he was all excited. He's talking to everybody at the party, telling them, you know what, this is great. I have a zero bill from PG&E at the end of the year. And now everybody's asking. And so I said to him, I said, you know, what about at night when the sun's down? Where do you get your electricity? Oh, from PG&E. And I said, when it's a cloudy day and it starts to rain, what happens? Oh, I get it from PG&E. And how do you get it from us? Well, it comes through the line in the house. Yeah, you have a line that goes into your house, right? Like everybody else, that's where the electricity comes in. And by the way, when you generate electricity more than you're using, so if you're generating more electricity from your solar panels, what do you do with it? Well, I sell it to you guys. Okay, and how do you get it to us? Through that line. And you know what? You have a line in your house. You have a transformer up on a pole outside of your house that helps, make sure that the electricity is at the right voltage and such. And where do you think that electricity comes from at night when you're using it? From our power plants. Well, he's not paying for any of that. So I looked at his neighbors and I said, you know who's paying for that? You are. Because that is who's paying for it. We've effectively, for those 90,000 people, we've effectively right now shifted $240 million of costs to everybody who doesn't have solar panels. So the utility's not paying for it, but all the other customers are. By 2020, we expect that number to be $750 million of costs that are going to go from people who do have solar panels on their rooftops to people who don't. Think about how fair that is to those people who don't. But that's the way the structure is. Right now, we're working with lawmakers to try to change that law, but it doesn't work that way. And it doesn't work that way. It's hard to get the law changed. You know why? Solar lobby is really good. The solar lobby in California is very effective because you walk into somebody that's a lawmaker and say, PG&E is trying to kill the solar industry. The solar industry is good. We're putting solar panels, free energy, free electricity from the sun. So they're very effective. I'm not saying they're bad. They're not bad. We fully support it. What we want to do, though, is change the structure so that it's more fair for everybody else. Have the people that own a solar panel pay for the line that goes in and out of their house, pay for the electricity they use from somewhere else. That's what we're trying to get to. It also has some challenges from a reliability standpoint. The system that we built was designed to put electricity into homes, not necessarily take electricity out of homes. It can do that. But all of a sudden, if you've got people now that are generating power at various times a day throughout their house, and they're using different amounts. So again, everybody would be in the same neighborhood, the sun's out the same way. But somebody might not be home, so they're not actually using any, and they're shipping a whole bunch of power out to us. Somebody might be home running their air conditioning. They may not be shipping any power to us. So now all of a sudden you have electricity flowing both ways, in and out of a house, in a neighborhood. Well, that might affect voltages on a very local basis. So you may find that you're sitting in your home and you don't have a rooftop solar. You're working on a computer, and all of a sudden it starts, dimming and going off and stuff. And it may be just because somebody else has got a solar panel on their house that's affecting that. So there's reliability issues. So again, price and reliability, two big things that we have to face. Now, again, we're actually very supportive. And at times, if you want to start up a new industry, so it's solar, if you want to really incentivize it, you do have to put subsidies in place to get it going. And it's worked because we've seen the cost of solar panels go through the floor. I mean, they've really come down over the last 5 years. And it's been very good. But at some point, you have to get those subsidies and get rid of them and phase them out. So that's something that we're working on. The third area, smart grid. Anybody here with smart grid? A few people? Smart grid. That's where we're really combining the electric grid with telecommunications and technology. And one of the things that's at the base of that is smart meters. When the lights go out at your house, how do you think PG&E knows about it? You have to call. Actually, not at PG&E anymore, but at most other utilities across the country. I don't know if you really know this. I mean, most people think that the utility knows. But if the lights are out at your house, theoretically, if you didn't call, they would stay out because people don't know that the lights are out. The only way that we can historically knew whether the lights are out at somebody's house is if you picked up the telephone and called. And then we could get an idea how big the outage is by the number of phone calls we got in. Nowadays, though, we have these new meters that we put on all of the homes in our service territory Smart meters, that now they measure the electricity being used quite frankly, constantly. We read it every 15 minutes. And if the lights go out in the house, it will send back a message to us. In fact, what will happen is it'll turn off, and then we'll get an instant message that the lights are out in that house. That's been tremendous for us. In fact, now we know the lights are out at your house sometimes before you do. If you're not at home, we will know your lights are out, and we can start to fix it. With the technology that's out there, not only will we get out and fix it, we actually have technology that can read that these 4 or 5 houses are out, and that then we'll start to reroute electricity around it so that it doesn't put other people out, as opposed to us having to go flip switches ourselves. So it's a great benefit. It's also a great benefit because now we don't have to have people driving trucks and walking out to everybody's house to go read the meters. We can read those meters, like I said, in 15 minutes, just automatically through Waves. Sounds great, right? But there are concerns. People have concerns about them. First concern they had was accuracy. Unfortunately, when we stuck these meters in, we made one really bonehead mistake, and that was we stuck them in Bakersfield, which is in the Central Valley, in the middle of summer, right after we did a rate increase. So all these people got these brand new meters, got this brand new bill, and their bill was like $1,000. It went up. Well, it went up because it was some of the hottest temperatures on record, and because we had just had a rate increase a month before, but they thought it was because the meter was new. They blamed it on the brand new meter. Fact is, these meters are 99.9% accurate, and the old meters were only about 97% accurate. In some instances, they were right. Their bill did go up because of the new meter, and the reason is because old meters had this little dial. I don't know, many of you have probably seen it on the sides of your house. There's a little dial on it. Those things have been there for 20, 30, 40 years. They get dirt in them. They run slow. So they actually were not getting charged for all the electricity they were using because the meters were running very slow, and you stick this nice new meter on, and guess what? Now you're getting charged for what you use. But that was one issue. Second one is that people, they have radio frequencies, these meters, because they're sending out a pulse. We're reading it over cellular lines and stuff. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with some of the areas of the coast of California, but we have some people who are very active in not liking that kind of stuff. So they raised a lot of concerns about health, saying that this would cause cancer in them and that they were having problems. In fact, we had one person, although this is kind of sad and I'm not trying to make fun of them, but they were claiming that our meters were giving them all these headaches and making them ill and all these kind of things. And meanwhile, they were doing that while they were talking on a cell phone. And the cell phone, by the way, you would have to sit next to one of these meters for about a year nonstop to get the same amount of radio frequencies as a cell phone is for an hour. So they are very safe, but if somebody has concerns. And then the third one is privacy. People are very afraid now. You can read my meter every 15 minutes. You're going to be Big Brother. You're going to look at everything we do. Well, I can tell you a couple things. First of all, we have 10 million of these meters. They read the meters every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. That is a heck of a lot of information. We couldn't if we tried to figure out what everybody was doing. But we also have rules and things in place so that we can't and don't let others see what's going on with the electricity usage. And plus, they don't read what's going on in the house. They only read what electricity is being used in total from the house. So those are three really big concerns that arose. Now, one of the solutions we did come up with is we let people opt out. If they didn't want this kind of meter, we let them have the old meter. They have to pay for that because now we have to employ somebody again to go walk the streets and do that. And everybody thought, yeah, that's a good idea. We have, I think, about 40,000 people have opted out of over 10 million. So most people are embracing this technology. And the reason they're embracing it is one of the best things that it does is that it gives the folks, everybody can look at their own usage. They can now manage their bills more easily. They can look online and they can see what their electricity usage is every hour of the day. We had one guy come in and say, I couldn't believe my electric bill was still high. I wasn't home. I didn't know what happened. Well, when he finally went back and investigated, his kids came back, went into town for the weekend while he was out of town and were using the house and using the pool. Or, somebody came back from college and was running the computer and the TV all night long. And you could see the electricity usage wasn't dipping down like it used to. So it gives information to people. They also, the next wave of this that we're experimenting with right now is that you can hook your computer up to these meters. And they're making now devices like refrigerators and washers and dryers and washing machines that will have chips in them that can talk to the meter. And when you have rates that change based on the time of day and based on the cost during the day, your I guess I'll call it your dishwasher, will be able to monitor the price through the meter and then can be programmed to turn off or turn on when it hits a certain low point in cost. I mean, fascinating kind of things that you'll be able to hook up throughout your whole system. So that's what these are. So the good news on this, again, thinking about the choices and the balance that we have to make, the good news is you get more information, they're more reliable, you get faster restoration, and you get a choice whether you want one or not. The bad thing is some of the concerns about safety and about privacy. So the last area that I want to talk about is electric vehicles. Anybody in here own an electric vehicle? Plug-in electric vehicle? No, huh? Okay. I can, we have a long way to go for electric vehicles, that's for sure. I actually drive a Camry hybrid, and I drive a Ford Fusion plug-in electric vehicle myself. And I'll tell you just a little side funny story about the cars. So my older son, when he was a sophomore in college, I told him that I would get him a car at that point in time, that he had earned it, that I would get him a car. And I'm not a car guy. I drive my cars for 15, 20 years until they fall apart somewhere. And about 4 years earlier, I had my last car had fallen apart. And at that point in time, I went out, and it was an old Mazda 626, and decided, maybe I should get something a little sportier. And I bought myself an Infiniti G35, which is a nice car. It's actually a pretty sporty little car. Drove it around for those 4 years, and it came time to get my son a car, and I told him, I said, you know what, I'm just not a car guy. I don't really like this car that much. So here's your choice, son. You can either have this car, or you can have, I'll buy you a car with the equivalent Blue Book value. Nice cheapskate dad. So whatever that was at that point in time. And he's no fool. He said, I'll take that car. So my younger son is looking at this, and he's saying, so this is how this works. Whatever car dad gets, I get when I'm a sophomore or when I finish my sophomore year in college. So dad was out looking, and I really fell in love with this BMW i 335 or 235, whichever convertible car. And my younger son is getting so excited. He's like, all right, Dad, that's a great car. You're going to buy, and he's thinking, okay, 4 or 5 years from now, I'm going to get that car. So the day comes, and I go out to buy a car. And you should have seen the look on his face when I walked in with that Camry hybrid. I did not hear he still complains about that. So evidently I had to buy him another different kind of car later because he didn't want that. But he was very disappointed. So we have those cars. California leads the way in a lot of things. We're first in these smart meters I was just talking about. Solar rooftops, I told you, we're the largest in the country. Electric vehicles, we are too. About 10 to 15% of all electric vehicles in the United States are in our service territory and in California. And we really do like and take our energy efficiency and our GHG reduction very seriously, and it's going to continue to grow. You can see by the lack of raising of hands, we do have a long ways to go, and we think we'll be there. But they're great because they have zero emissions, so they're right along the lines with environmental policy. They have energy security because you're not relying on external oil from foreign countries. They have very low maintenance costs, and we know that because we actually have we have the largest electric vehicle fleet as a utility in the country, and we've seen our maintenance costs go down by 70% associated with these electric vehicles. And selfishly, it's one of the few areas where we can actually grow as a utility. As I said, we're incented to sell less of our product. But one place we can sell more of our product is by charging electric vehicles up. And people like that because it's overall good for the economy. So for us, it's a very good growth deal. It does have one big challenge. And that big challenge is that those things use a lot of electricity, those electric vehicles. In fact, if you look at number 2 there, so if you plug in your electric vehicle into where you would normally plug in your washer or your dryer, so the 240 volt area, that's the same as adding a brand new house to the block. Same amount of electricity that you would use just to plug that in and charge it up. So think about that. If all of a sudden on your block, all your neighbors plugged in a car, that would be like adding 4 or 5 new houses to that block on that same transformer that's outside of your house. They're not equipped to do that. So we've had to work out deals with some of the electric vehicle dealers to make sure that we understand where people are buying the cars so that we can make sure that the infrastructure is there to handle all of that, to get it plugged in. And that's one of the challenges that we face with that. So hopefully you get a sense of looking at it from an industry. We love renewables. There's great things about them. There's challenging things about them. We love solar panels. There's great things about them. There's challenging things about them. We love the smart meters and the electric vehicles. All of those are exciting new things, new technologies. But when I talked at the beginning about choices, you have to weigh the costs and the benefits. So with all those exciting things, how do you make that decision that says, yes, we need to invest, we need to do the renewables, even though it's going to cost people this much money? Even though we're not going to give them sometimes a choice, that it's really going to cost them that. And how do you balance that policy decision making with the economic side? It's not always just about the numbers. In fact, today's world, if you think about it, it used to be, how'd you find out about a company? You looked at their 10K, their annual report. That's where you learned all about the company. Everything that you needed to know was in there, all about the bottom line and the numbers. But in today's world, it's changing. Now we all have these things called sustainability reports. I don't know if any of you have ever seen these, but it's really big in the utility industry, and I think it's getting bigger outside of the utility industry, where it now focuses not just on the bottom lines, but it focuses on things like the environment. So how much GHG do you produce as a company? It focuses on the community. How much involvement do you have in your community? What kind of dollars are you spending? What kind of volunteer hours are you doing? It also looks at diversity. What is your spend on diversity? So all of these things are now just as important as what the bottom line is. Don't get me wrong, the bottom line is very important in today's world. If you can't meet some of those requirements, you're in trouble. But just as important as some of these other things. And even when you go and talk on Wall Street, they do talk about those kind of things. They want to know about where you are in an environment. In fact, you can buy funds that invest in companies that are very good to the environment. And that's really where we see changes in where we're going. And it's moving from how we make money to why we make money. And there is a distinction between that. We can all talk about how we make money, what's the important things, but some of it is why do we do it? And why are we doing that? And how do we then weigh the social concerns with making the dollars? And so what that will lead to, and the thing that I'll finalize here before we get to questions, is changing in leadership. It's going to take a different kind of leader to really be able to focus on all of those things. Because if you can make good policy, and if you have good leaders, then you're still going to have good profits. They will all align up. I believe that through and through. And so one of the things that the professor or the dean asked me to do is that you're all young, aspiring, going to go out into the business world, talk a little bit about what are some of the qualities that we're looking for. And I'll tell you, I couldn't have gotten luckier because we just finished up our annual planning process on Tuesday and Wednesday, or at least one part of it. And one of the pieces that we look at is our talent. We look at managing our talent. And so one of the things we went through was saying, in 5 years from now, what kind of talent do our leaders need to be to get us to where we want to be and to be able to operate in this kind of environment? And so we came up with the 10 things that we need for our leaders, to what the characteristics were. And I thanked the whole team. I said, God, you guys just finished my speech for me, because that's what they wanted to know. What are some of the leadership characteristics? So I'm not going to go through all 10 of them. But what I am going to talk about is probably 4 or 5 of them. And it's very important for us right now, because I don't know if anybody heard of the gray tsunami? Anybody know what that is? The gray tsunami. For me, it's the bald tsunami, but for others, it's the gray tsunami. It does have to do with hair. The gray tsunami is that at our company, we employ 21,000 people. Over the next 4 years, 40% of those people are eligible to retire. It's 8,000 jobs that potentially could leave and turn over in the next 4 years. And that's not just at PG&E. That is all the utility industry as a whole. In fact, it's probably for many other industries, but at least in the utility industry, that is a lot of jobs. We call it the gray tsunami because we have to figure out how do we replace all those people, all that knowledge that they have. And it puts a lot of pressure on us to then look at what are the skills we need. So the first one for us is always going to be safety, and thinking and having a culture of safety, a thought process around safety, because we work with dangerous products. We work with electricity and gas, and they can be dangerous. People can die if it's not handled correctly. So we need people that embrace and think about safety, not just for themselves, but for the public that we serve. And so that's one thing. The second thing is what you guys all probably already have, but need to exploit a little bit more, and that's technological savvy. is that when we look out today, technology has really only been introduced probably in the last 5 to 10 years in a big way in the electric and gas industry. And we know, following things like AT&T and in the telephone industry, that once you get technology introduced, the speed of change is so rapid, so fast, more fast than anything you've seen before, that you got to have people that really understand it. So you have your iPads and your iPhones and all the other technology that you're familiar with. You need to embrace that and learn about how do you use that to your advantage. How do companies use that and understand how they can get better? And it's not just IT technology. It's also physical technology. So like solar panels and the technology we're using to get what I call a self-healing grid so that we can detect outages before they occur and go out and fix them. Or so it's self-healing that if an outage occurs, everything around it gets surrounded automatically by technology and just prevents anybody else from going out without electricity. So embracing and really taking advantage and knowing and understanding how technology can be used and be helpful. The third one is big data. You might have heard the term big data analytics. As I said before, we're reading meters every 15 minutes for 10 million different meters. That generates millions and millions and millions of records. That's a lot of data. We need to turn it into information. We need to turn it into something that people can use and can make decisions with, can provide products to customers with, can help our customers manage their energy better. We have that all over the place in our industry. And so folks that can understand how to take big data and turn it into useful information is something that we're looking for in future leaders. Embracing change and leading the pace of change. Again, change happens very rapidly. You've heard that part before. But folks that really understand how to make change happen, that have the courage to stand up and say, I'm willing to take this on and make a change in this company. That's another leadership characteristic. And then the last one is two more. Customer focus. You always have to have somebody, because at the end of the day, it's very easy. And people do this a lot in businesses. You get into your little cubicle or your little office, and you're in maybe IT. All you're focused on is IT. Or maybe you're in engineering, and all you're focused on is designing that exactly the right way. But you have to think broader. You have to understand, well, if I'm designing this pole in this way to go in this place in the house, what's that mean to that customer? How does that affect that customer? So for instance, we have people that they design how to trim trees because we have to keep them away from our poles. Well, we also have farmers that grow trees, and on their trees there's crops that they use to sell. A lot of times our guys will go through and they'll just chop the top of the tree off, or they'll cut this really nice L shape right on the side of it. Really attractive. Well, we're taking money away from our customers because that's their crop, that's their livelihood. So when people are designing it, they have to think broadly about what I'm doing have an impact on our customers. And then the last one is to look for continuous improvement. At the end of the day, it still does come down to some money. And it's how do you get the most out of everything that you're doing? How do you really understand how to take care of that dollar? Because that dollar is very important. You've got to always treat it like it's your very own. So I'll end my talk here with one last story. And I appreciate you embracing and being patient with my stories. But anybody hear the term cold hard cash? Yeah, we know what that means, right? Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad was a steel worker. We didn't have a lot of money. And this teaches me the value of the dollar all the time. And so what he would do is every 2 weeks he would get paid. He would take that check to the bank and he would cash it, and he would leave half of it in for savings, or some amount of it in for savings and some amount of it in for the mortgage. He'd bring it home. And when he came home, he had this little box, and inside of it he had a bunch of index cards. And he had little labels on them. He had groceries, gasoline, utility bill, school supplies, those kind of things. And he would take that cash and he would divvy it up and put it in between each one. And basically, that's what we had. If we needed groceries, we could go back there, and that's all we had. If you didn't have any cash in that little slot, you didn't buy it. We didn't have credit cards. That's the way he worked. It's just, if you didn't have the money there, you didn't need it. You didn't buy it. So you learn to be very frugal with each and every dollar. You learn to own every single one of those dollars yourselves. And I've taken that throughout my whole career to make sure that we always look for that last dollar and that we own it and we take care of it. Now, why do I bring up cold hard cash? Because my dad was also a little paranoid. and he would take that little box and he would hide it in the back of the refrigerator. And so we literally had cold, hard cash in our house. So thank you very much for your patience today. And I do understand we have time for some questions, so I'll be glad to answer as many as I can in this time frame.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question. How did the events and reforms surrounding the recall of Governor Gray Davis affect the operations of PG&E?
So the question was, how did the effects and reforms under Governor Gray Davis, affect PG&E? He was actually recalled. That was back when we had an energy crisis. And realistically, what happened was, and I'll try to do this quickly, California had this great idea of deregulating generation of electricity in California. And they were one of the leaders in doing that. It didn't work. And rather than just tweak it a little bit to make it work like other states eventually did, we basically went backwards. And during that whole time, it didn't work so bad that lights started going out. We had brownouts and blackouts in the state. So Governor Gray Davis got recalled. How did it affect us? It actually put us into bankruptcy. Because at the end of the day, the way the law was written is we had to sell our electricity that we owned and generated into the market at a fixed price, at a small fixed price. And then we had to buy the electricity for our customers at a market price, which was, by the way, about 10 times as much. So if we're selling it for $1 and buying it back for $10, you can't make that up on volume. We were losing $10 million a day as a company. So we went into bankruptcy. And we were in for, I think, 4 years before we got it reformed. We were actually we were one of the few companies to ever go into bankruptcy that was solvent because it wasn't anything from a product standpoint. We were able to sell our electricity. It was just the way the market was set up is that we were forced to sell it in at a low price and then buy it back at a high price, and our customers weren't being forced to pay it. We were just being forced to eat it, our shareholders. So we went into bankruptcy, came back out much stronger as a company, and the reforms were made in the state. I'm surprised you, well, I guess you'd be alive back then. That was only 2000. Others? Yeah. Mike Rain.
Hi, thank you very much for coming today.
Sure.
Can you comment on deregulation? It's been a trend that a lot of states have gone. I know California isn't deregulated, but do you have an opinion on deregulation?
Deregulation is actually very active in many states across the United States, and I think in a lot of instances it works very well. It's just generation that's deregulated, so somebody else can build a plant and sell that power into the marketplace. The biggest challenge with the deregulation of generation is are there appropriate market signals to incent somebody to build more generation? That's always been the struggle throughout the states that have deregulation is there enough of them? Because you have to build these plants, you have to be able to anticipate it years in advance. And so there has to be a signal out there, a price signal or something that says, yes, it's worth me investing $900 million in building this facility that I know isn't going to operate for a few years. In fact, that's what really right now harms the nuclear industry is it takes 10 years or so to build, to permit and then build a nuke, and it's going to cost you, $4 or $5 billion. Well, I'd love to be in the boardroom that sits there and says, well, we're going to make an investment in a nuclear facility. It's going to cost us $5 billion. It's going to take us 10 years to build. We're going to have to finance over all that time, and then we're going to sell the electricity in a market with very thin margins. That's a tough discussion. So I think it's worked. I think it's helped customers get a lower price in many instances. But the only struggles we've seen is that are there adequate price signals to incent new generation to be built? Oops, I didn't see him either.
So do you think large-scale energy storage is feasible in the near future? If not, what sort of time horizon do you see on it? And can you speak a little bit how that would impact your business?
I didn't hear the last part.
Can you speak to how that would impact your business?
Yeah, storage is a big deal. And when you talk about storage, there's different types of storage. One type of storage that we have that we love is what we call pump storage. So we have water at the top of the hill, water at the bottom of the hill. We let it down during the day, and we can generate electricity, in a hydro facility. And then at night, we pump the water back up the hill. And that actually is storage. That helps us with that ramping that I showed you earlier. But most people, when they talk about storage, think about battery storage. And large, when you think about it, in fact, some people have a dream that they'll have a solar panel on their house and a battery in their garage, and then they won't need the electric utility anymore. Not so sure that can happen because so far you can't actually start a washer, or a refrigerator or an air conditioner with a solar panel. You have to have more boost to it. But battery technology is moving forward. We actually have some experiments that we're doing, some pilots where we've bought some batteries. But right now it's very expensive and it's not moving that quickly. In fact, California right now is looking at, similar to what we did with solar, putting some mandates in that have all the utilities do X amount of battery storage to spur the industry on. And a unique thing, though, that's really interesting is you've heard of Tesla, really nice car, really expensive car, but a really nice car, an all-electric car. They actually see themselves not only as an electric company, but as a battery company. And some of they're continually, trying to improve their battery because they want it to be cheaper, smaller, last longer on their cars. But from that technology, we're also learning because we may be able to use some of that in storage for our facilities. We can picture a time when you have large batteries maybe sitting out in substations and you use them for storage, but I think it's still pretty far away. You said the near future. We don't see it like in the next 5 years or something. The technology has to advance at a much more rapid pace to make it not only feasible from a technological standpoint, but also from a price standpoint.
Hi, I was wondering how PG&E is dealing with some of the more challenging parts of renewable resources, particularly the effect of wind farms on like raptor and predatory bird populations. There's a lot of controversy right now with how many of those die per year and how you can possibly try to prevent that. And I was just wondering what your company is doing to try to deal with that very challenging issue.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't own any wind farms. We only buy from wind farms. But we actually have a bird man that works for us. And then he scours our landscape all the time looking for dead birds to see why and how they're affected, why they died for protected areas. So what we've done is we actually will turn down contractors based on if they are in tough areas. So, for instance, we looked at a contract down in the Tehachapi Mountains that is right around where the endangered species condors live. And we have their flight patterns as to where they go look for food. And these guys were planning on putting some wind farm in and around that area, and we've said no. We just turned it down. We had our own little farm that we were looking at maybe doing ourselves, but it also had some falcons that were nesting out there, and we've had to turn that down. So it's a big challenge that you face as a business that says, maybe that would have been where the condors was. That probably was a very economical, cheap source of wind and electricity, and you're doing your customers a big favor if you can do that. On the other hand, condors are protected in the state of California, and you don't want to run into, if you have one of those die, you can be fined, and that goes against what your shareholders are. So it is something that you have to think through and weigh all the time. In fact, I had a situation 2 years ago that was fascinating from just a intellectual business standpoint. We run gas lines, and we had a gas line that was running through an environmentally protected area. Obviously, when the gas line was built, it wasn't an environmentally protected area, but now it is. And it had a leak in it. So we had to decide we needed to go in and fix the leak. But we weren't allowed to take any of our equipment onto the land where the leak was. So my lawyers and team presented me. They said, Chris, here's your choice. You have a gas leak that is endangering society, and you have to understand that the minute you set foot on there, you are going to be subject to federal environmental laws, which basically can be felonies, personal felonies. So we fixed the gas leak. I said, will they give us a waiver? No, they don't do that. The government doesn't do that. So, we took the risk, fixed the gas leak, did it as environmentally sensitively as we could, and the government didn't do anything to us. But it is interesting at times you have to face those kind of choices.
Hi. You guys have a relatively large nuclear energy sector. I was wondering if you see that as an effective solution to solving fossil fuels, and like what you have done, long-term solutions for storing your nuclear waste, as well as if you think it's safe in a state with fault lines and potential for earthquakes.
Great. So nuclear facility, we have the now the only nuclear facility in California. As far as, I'll answer your question in two ways. For California as a whole, we won't have any more nuclear built in California. First of all, there's a law that makes it illegal to build any new nuclear facility until there is a federal depository for nuclear waste, which there isn't, and I don't know when there ever will be. So it effectively makes it impossible to build a new nuclear facility in California. For the United States, I actually think it's a very big part and should be a big part of our future generation resources. It is greenhouse gas free, and it has been run very safely for decades. It is a great source, and it's a cheap source of fuel. Now building them is still expensive, and so you have to do the math around that. There's only 2 that I know that are being built right now, both down in the southeast part of the United States. But just as I think there's a large role for more solar, for more wind, I think there's a great role for more nuclear because it is greenhouse gas free. The issue around storage is still a big one. The federal government has not taken and found a place to do that. It's a very politically charged situation and will continue to be. There's some people that are suggesting, in fact, one of our senators is suggesting that we have, instead of one mass site, that we look for some pilot smaller sites to put nuclear waste. Right now, all the utilities are storing it on site. And is it safe? Yes, it's safe. It's in these massive storage casks that are, some are above ground, some are buried in the ground, surrounded by concrete. They're in things that if they got, if you transported them, if they got hit by a train, they wouldn't break open. They are in a very safe area. Yes, we have a lot of earthquakes. In fact, our facility is built on or near a fault line. But we have probably some of the smartest, in fact, we're the only company in utility in the United States that has its own seismic organization that studies what the possibilities are for earthquakes and how big they could be. And our facility was built to withstand very large earthquakes down there. So we feel pretty good about that. It's been operated very safely since it was built in the 80s. And so I still think it is something that the U.S. should have as part of is ultimately their whole energy portfolio in the future.
I just have a question about the security. A lot of people are talking about how the energy grid in the United States is vulnerable to like cyber attacks and stuff like that. What are you guys doing, if anything, to protect from hackers and stuff to hack into like those new meters that you guys have?
Did you say from terrorist attacks?
Or just people,
cybersecurity?
Yeah.
Yeah. So cybersecurity right now is one of the hottest issues in our industry. And it's not really from a standpoint of somebody getting in and getting all of our customers' information and getting their credit card numbers and stuff. That's important, and we have a lot of controls in that. What our bigger concern is can somebody get in and cause large mass outages? And so, I can never give a guarantee that they can't, because in this world today, we employ lots of people whose total job is to stop people from hacking in. And then other people, in fact, foreign countries hire people whose sole job is to hack in. So every time we find some way that somebody's hacked in, we put a stop to it, there's another way. So it's a full employment for anybody that wants to get into cybersecurity. It is a full employment act for many years because it is something that we're constantly trying to build. So we do things like we separate our whole financial system from our operating system, and we keep the operating system not talking to the internet, so that it makes it a little harder for anybody to be able to get in there. But the interesting thing about it is that when you look at cybersecurity, the things, it's not like they're massively sophisticated. What they do is phishing exercises, where they send you the email, and all they need is somebody to just click on the link, and they're in, and that's how they do it. We've been told that China has got, the Chinese government has employed thousands of people who their sole job is to just send out these messages all day long. Right now, for most of the intelligence that we've been given is that it's for industrial espionage, so it's stealing secrets as opposed to trying to cause outages. But it is something that we and the entire industry are working together on. I myself have secret clearance with the government so that I can be updated on things that they find and see, because our government is doing a lot to look for cyber attacks throughout the United States, and they tell us whenever they're aimed at a utility and how they're doing it and what the protocols are. So we have a full group. We have I think about 60 people that work for us that work on nothing but cybersecurity for us. It is a big deal. One last question, I think.
I'm kind of changing topics here, but how did your degree in accounting and your previous job at KPMG prepare you for your current job as president?
Well, an accounting degree is really helpful, I can tell you. Now, the way it did is because what it did for me is I've been naturally curious. So accounting, you can't really be a good accountant unless you understand the business that you're accounting for, whether you're an auditor or an internal accountant. You have to really understand the business. And so one of the things I used to enjoy at KPMG was really being able to go out and go to my clients and watch how they make something. So if it's a manufacturing process, go out and watch that. Or at the utilities, go to the power plants and see how they're doing that, or go out in the field. And so it helped me merge how companies were operated with the financial side of it. And so when you're doing the accounting, yes, you can get by, and I used to yell at my team all the time because they would just sit there and heads down and do the numbers. But you can't really be good at it unless you understand what those numbers mean and how they affect the company and how the company influences those things. And so when I was at KPMG, I did a lot of that and talking with my customers and understanding it. When I got to PG&E, I was the controller. In fact, one year I even made, as part of my team's goals, every one of my leaders had to go out and meet with somebody outside of the accounting area and document that they did that meeting and learn something out of it, because I needed people to get out and really understand. And so the ability to go out and see how the rest of the business runs really enhanced my ability to be an accountant. Then as I went up and was put into positions like this, because I had so much interest in how the business ran, and understood the number side, they naturally said, well, okay, you've got a good broad basis already for how the business runs because you go out and do that. The most fun I have when I was CFO, when I was a controller, and today is going out, working with the teams in the field, talking to them, not working, they won't let me do that because it's dangerous stuff, but going out and talking to them, observing them, and talking to them about what works, what doesn't work, what's safe, what's not safe, how they're handled financially, and then being able to bring that back. And I think that's one of the biggest things I could tell you is that no matter what job you take, don't just focus on that. Get out and understand your company, how it makes its money, how it operates day in and day out, because that will enhance, no matter what you're doing, your skills at that level. So thank you again. I know you have to go. I really appreciate the time. And